Educational Communications and this station present Environmental Directions with Nancy Pearlman. On this series, we explore the effects of human influence on the Earth's ecosystems and discuss solutions to environmental problems which affect the quality of life on this planet. Environmental Directions gives you the kind of information you need to help you participate in decisions impacting your community, the nation, and the world. Now, here's your host, Nancy Pearlman.
Hello, my guest is Tom Marchesello. He is the Chief Operating Officer for Origin Clear. Welcome, it's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you very much. I appreciate being on your show.
You have worked for over 25 years in operations, logistics, production, and are an advisor on ESG, environmental, social, and governance to corporations. But you're focusing on water treatment, and your company has created an innovative modular water treatment solution for businesses so that they don't have to be connected to the main utility infrastructure. How does that work?
Absolutely. Thank you for pointing that out. Yeah, modular water treatment systems allow you to have an on-site water treatment capability on your own property. And so a lot of commercial and industrial clients who are heavy water users have a need as well as a legal responsibility to treat their own water, because they can't expect the city or the government to do it for them. You make these pieces of equipment that are about the size of a tractor trailer and or smaller, and you basically place them on site to treat the water.
How do you treat the water? Because I know that I have seen some places that have renovated their facilities and they create a wastewater treatment pond the way nature works.
Yeah, so nature only works so much. And so wastewater ponds and lagoons is actually one of our end customer markets. So sometimes nature through aeration and oxidation, which is, using the sun and air to clean water, isn't good enough for a commercial or industrial process because they may be using chemicals and or the materials that they were producing were too strong in the water body. So what we do is we basically add filtration, so basically a filter system or microfilter system that would remove contaminants from water and then return it back to a discharge basin. So it could go to a pond, but it would be a lot cleaner, or it could go back to the city where it wouldn't be contaminated. And it can speed up the whole process to where the water can be cleaned much, much more rapidly than just waiting out time.
You're focusing on businesses, but you also have something called Evera Camp water treatment systems that you're promoting for RV and campgrounds.
Yeah, so we have different end markets, like different clients. During different moments of time, certain industries seem to be needing more water. So ironically, COVID was a strange moment in everybody's life where people decided they want to go get back to the great outdoors and experience nature and go camping with their families and stuff. So all of a sudden they started storming campgrounds and RV parks and going back to nature on the weekend. And what was happening is the RV parks and campgrounds were becoming overloaded with too many people. And they were running out of water to drink. And of course, when people were there, they need to use the restrooms. So RV park and campgrounds were overflowing with wastewater because too many people were coming. And essentially that drove a need for the RV parks and campgrounds to install additional water treatment on site to treat the wastewater to make it clean and keep the environment clean, which is the whole purpose of going out to nature, right? Which is let's go enjoy the nice water and the nice trees and not make a mess.
I want to understand the process a little bit more. I certainly would hope that you're not using a lot of toxic, dangerous chemicals.
No, that's actually our claim to fame. We use no chemicals, and that's one of the things that people love about us. So one of our pieces of equipment that treats like these ponds or lagoons or these waste systems is 100% biological. So what we do is we make a tank, essentially, a large water tank basin, and inside of it we place nanoparticle materials that basically act like, almost like how coral works, where it basically then attaches to the bacterias and the matter that's floating in the water, and it grabs them and attaches them and then eats them. So we use biological processes with organic material to basically get rid of the waste. And so we're not putting chemicals in the system.
How often do you have to replace that biological component?
The actual filters themselves stay in place for many years as a physical device, and then what you do is you recharge it with biological material. So sometimes maybe every 6 months to every year you come through and you add new biologicals to it.
What about places like my mountain cabin that has no sewer system in the town? I have a septic tank. Should I be replacing the septic tank with some water treatment plant, or should I do the gray water system?
That's a great question. So now septic systems and sewage systems is at the cornerstone of why you see like this big push for infrastructure by the Biden administration. You know, we've talked about the aging infrastructure of America for a long time. One of those things is septic and sewer. In the old days, people used to build septic tanks and sewer systems on property and let the seeping just kind of use gravity flow. It'll flow through, you know, a bedrock down to a sand level, down to a ground level, and let the materials kind of just sink and separate. Or they'll use a tank, and the tank will hold materials, and they'll pump it out with a pump and haul truck that pumps it down somewhere else.
Very costly, I found out.
Those systems, very costly, but also they break down over time. So over like 30 years, for example, a steel tank or a concrete tank that was a septic tank will eventually corrode because the acid basically that builds up on the side walls of those tanks eats the material and then causes cracks, and eventually all that material leaks out and then it goes straight into the ground. So that is a terrible thing that's happening all over America, all over everywhere, as a matter of fact. So one of the reasons you're seeing cities and towns outlaw septic tank systems is because they're fundamentally not safe for the environment, and they have to be replaced. So you can replace them in two ways. One, you replace the materials. So you get rid of the concrete and steel, and you replace it with a heavy plastic that doesn't corrode, which is one of our technologies, as a matter of fact. That's one of the things our company does. We use these tankages that'll last 50 to 100 years without corroding. So that's one of the first actions. The second thing we do is we add biological treatment to it, where you basically then bring oxidation and aeration to a system, which basically brings air and then brings light to a system. So you could add something like ultraviolet light to kill bacteria. So by treating it a little bit with some natural treatments, you can knock down the waste level. Then when the waste level is now more pure and easier to release, now you can push it back into the environment. If you want to discharge it to a lake or a stream or a pond or to the ground, you're not releasing wastewater anymore. Now you're just releasing recycled water.
How is your company involved in this Piney Point wastewater pond catastrophe in Florida?
We're not technically directly involved in it. What's happened there was the industry, which was the phosphorus industry, which is very big here in Florida, is in my own backyard. And it turns out this thing's been going on for like decades and decades and decades. And we were just like, oh my gosh, these people are actually contaminating the ground, and they're contaminating the water, and they have these leakages that get into our water systems and our well water systems and into our bay. So Piney Point comes along, and what was happening there was a phosphate mining processing plant that was processing the materials, and phosphate gets used in the fertilizer business for agriculture, which they spray all over the ground, right? That material is very toxic to produce, and it has a lot of byproducts, metals, and actually active uranium is in there. And this wastewater, which is part of their processing, instead of getting rid of the waste in the wastewater, they just stick it in a giant pond next to the processing plant, and they let it hang out for 10, 20, 30, 40 years. And then hope maybe it somehow settles to the bottom and goes away and evaporates, except it doesn't. And in this case, they're waiting around, and the dam broke. Basically, the side wall of this pond that they stuck it in literally broke, and the water came rushing out of the side of it and then made its way leaking straight into the Tampa Bay. Instead of treating it, they said, whoa, this is bad. We're about to flood the town. 400 million gallons of wastewater, toxic wastewater, straight into Tampa Bay.
That does not sound good.
Yeah, it's pretty terrible. Literally in one day, they released the equivalent of an entire year's worth of wastewater that would normally dump into the bay.
Could it have been cleaned up?
It could have and should have been cleaned up. So we got involved only so much as we make equipment, and we have engineers and services that easily could have advised and or provided services to these processing plants to allow them to clean up their own stuff on site. And that was our whole purpose of being involved, which is, we provide these industrial clients with these machines that can do on-site cleanup. There's no reason to ignore a wastewater problem, which is technically a wastewater landfill is what that thing is. And instead they did. They just let it go on and on and on.
I travel and do documentaries throughout the world where many communities and countries don't have the kind of infrastructure that we do, don't even have the sewer systems that we do, which here, like in Los Angeles, we hope that our sewer goes to the treatment plant, gets treated before the wastewater gets eliminated into the ocean, and hopefully it's clean. But these other places don't have any kind of infrastructure. Is your independent on-site modular wastewater treatment technology viable in places that don't have an infrastructure and don't have the money to spend a lot of money to get the waste cleaned up?
Yes, our equipment can be placed on site to help disadvantaged communities. Drinking water systems are very easy to put in place and affordable for everybody. So you can always do that. You can clean up well water, you can clean up river and lake water, and you can make water available for drinking and bathing. But sanitary sewer and sewage and wastewater systems, which we also do, those can indeed be placed on site also because, for example, we do it with the military or embassies who are scattered around the globe for encampments. But what we find is in very poor countries, island communities, for example, they need the equipment, but they can't afford it. And so then that becomes the problem, right? Which is, how do you get the equipment there if nobody wants to pay for it? And that's where it gets really strange because there's so many organizations out there that could underwrite it. There's organizations that raise charity money or have available money or even Red Cross facilities, and they could place these pieces of equipment on site, but they don't. Instead, they seem to hand out water bottles to people, which is crazy to me.
That creates another problem.
Right. We could actually place a water treatment plant right there in a community, and it would be perpetual.
It sounds as though you need to work more heavily with the international agencies and communities to say, this is a better solution, this is a more affordable solution in the long run.
It's been a long road. The truth of the matter is, we've never been successful at any agency ever paying for it. They, for some odd reason, think that we have to donate everything for free.
Let us certainly hope that there can be more cooperation in the future. Coming back to the United States, you are focusing on businesses being self-sufficient, having sustainable, independent infrastructure through your wastewater treatment technology. How many are willing to invest in that and do that?
Well, quite a number. I mean, our physical business in Texas, because we have a factory there where we make our equipment, has been in business for over 40 years. We've had many hundreds and hundreds of clients that are commercial and industrial clients. And they range from power plants to pharmaceutical companies to food and beverage makers.
I'm so excited about new technologies to help clean up our environmental mess and make sure that we don't create more toxic situations. I want to thank you very much for making this technology available. Thank you for being my guest.
Thanks. I really appreciate it. And thank you very much for what you do. We really care about this planet and our lives, and water is at the cornerstone usage by everybody. And so we really feel like we're not just, doing a great business, but we're doing a great service for people out there, and it makes us really proud.
Thank you. I have been speaking with Tom Marchesello, who is the Chief Operating Officer with Origin Clear. I'm Nancy Perlman. Thank you very much for joining us, and do tune in again next week.
If you would like free information about these environmental issues, go to www.ecoprojects.org or call 310-559-9160. Environmental Directions with your host, Nancy Perlman, is a community affairs program of the nonprofit organization Educational Communications and this station.